If you've followed my channel for a while, you know that I'm an avid cyclist and have been largely car-free for a few years. Last summer, my cats and I relocated to a rural area in Zeeuws-Vlaanderen in the province of Zeeland in the far south of the Netherlands. I've wanted to live in Europe for a few decades, and given the current state of affairs in the US, it seemed as good a time as any to make the move. People here in Zeeland often ask how I ended up in a small rural village. Well, I chose the area because that's where I could afford to buy a livable house, and because, believe it or not, I actually like it here. The Netherlands is known as a country of people that ride bikes. It's simply one of the main forms of transportation here and has been for a very long time. As someone that prefers cycling to driving, that was a compelling reason for me to choose the Netherlands. It's been a year since I arrived in the Netherlands to look for a house and start the process of moving, and it seemed a fitting time to reflect back on my experience cycling here. Prior to deciding to move here, I had spent all of a few hours in the Netherlands during a layover in Amsterdam back in high school. I've spent quite a bit of time in Germany and figured the Netherlands would be similar enough to be a suitable fit. It was also the only visa that worked for my business plans, and the cycling? Well, that's considered world class. I flew into Brussels airport in Belgium, and one of the first things I noticed leaving the airport was a large, secure parking area for bicycles, even in Belgium. Driving to Zeeland for my house search, I had a lot of views of bike paths everywhere. I still clearly remember riding with my realtor as we passed fields of tulips and cycle paths everywhere. And all of it was flat as far as the eye could see. As a cyclist who doesn't like hills and loves long stretches of bike path, it was hard to imagine anything more ideal. I instantly fell in love with Zeeland. I actually bought my house knowing almost nothing about the area. I initially thought I would have a 15-mile ride to a town large enough for a home improvement store, variety of grocery stores, and other things like patio furniture. It wasn't until I searched Google Maps after buying the house that I learned I was only a few kilometers from 2 home improvement stores, 4 grocery stores, a hospital with a pharmacy, multiple restaurants, a pet store, a home goods store, and a lot of other things. If that wasn't enough, I discovered I could get there entirely on separated bike path. Nowhere in the US did I ever have this kind of access to shopping. The home improvement store where I lived in Minneapolis was buried in an area full of heavily trafficked 4-lane roads with massive busy intersections. I once cycled there and never had the courage to do it again. There were plenty of grocery stores around, but all but one were also buried in massive parking lots and areas with multi-lane roads and heavy traffic. I don't think I ever cycled to a pet store in the US. I'm not even sure the area pet stores had bike racks. Here, everywhere there are bicycle racks. The home improvement store even has covered bicycle parking. The train stations, the bus stops, they all have bicycle parking, often covered, sometimes even secured and underground in larger areas. Even in towns where paths end, the speed limits are low and there are enough cyclists around that drivers are used to watching for them. The same is true when paths cross roads. There are typically raised areas on the road to physically remind drivers that they're crossing a critical intersection. This is truly a country designed with cycling in mind, both for safety and for transportation. So imagine my surprise when my neighbors all expressed shock that I didn't own a car and had no plans to buy one. So too music schools I've interviewed with. When people learn that I cycled sometimes an hour to get somewhere, they're shocked and amazed. They think I must be some sort of super strong cyclist. Trust me, I'm not. The reality I'm finding is that cycling in the Netherlands is viewed as a way to make short trips. Here in rural Zeeland, where things are further apart, the distance is viewed as being really far, and so people use a car. That's not to say that traffic's heavy here or that people don't cycle, but it's not like the larger cities where bikes are everywhere. The most use I see of bikes here is kids riding to and from school and the occasional neighbor venturing out to pick up a few groceries. Somehow, I've managed to end up in a country of people that cycle and still be the odd duck for cycling. So why don't people cycle more here, especially when the cycling infrastructure is so extensive? Based on conversations I've had, it seems to mainly be the mentality that cycling is for shorter distances. Towns are typically closer here in Europe, unlike the US where things are spread out. My neighbors consider the village we live in as being in the middle of nowhere, and thus you need a car. A short trip to them is walking across the street to the store. To me, having all the stores I need a 10-minute bike trip away is a short trip. So why don't I integrate and buy a car? First, I don't feel like I need one. Between my bike and my velomobile, I can get where I need to go in a reasonable length of time on very safe bike paths, and for longer distances, there's the bus and the train. Second, I'm not in a huge hurry to get anywhere, nor do I need to travel far very often. Part of the draw was the slower pace of life, and for me, cycling to my destination is part of that. Finally, despite my clean driving record in the US and 3 decades of driving experience, my driver's license doesn't transfer. I'd have to take driving lessons and pass the driven and written tests, both of which are notoriously difficult and cost a couple $1,000s. Then there's the cost of a car, insurance, the high price of gas. Financially, it just makes no sense to me, and frankly, I enjoy cycling past the peaceful fields of Zeeuws-Vlaanderen. I'm used to cycling in any sort of weather after cycling in Minneapolis winters, so the weather doesn't bother me either. Perhaps as I get older my view will change, but even then, there's still the option of the bus. In short, I just really enjoy cycling, especially here in Zeeland. The bigger question for me is, why don't more of my neighbors cycle? Are there other reasons I'm not aware of? With the price of gas already being high and currently trending even higher due to the war in Iran, I'm curious if people would consider cycling more often and what it would take to persuade them to choose cycling rather than driving. Hopefully a few Zeelanders will watch this video and maybe share some insight in the comments on the perspective of cycling as transport. As a cyclist, I cannot imagine a better place to have landed. Traffic volume is low, bike paths go everywhere, there are endless small, quiet country roads through the farm fields, it's dead flat, and yet the scenery is still interesting, and I can get everywhere in the area without having to interact with cars. For me, it's what cycling dreams are made of, and the ideal location to be car-free. I hope others here realize how fortunate they are, and perhaps I can inspire more people in the area to take advantage of it and join me in cycling more and driving less. Thanks for watching. Remember to like and subscribe, and if you're from this area or know about the cycling culture here, leave a comment about why cycling isn't more prevalent. I'm genuinely curious. I'm also working on developing a guide to cycling in this area, mainly from a touristic perspective, so be sure to watch for future videos about that project as it develops. Once it's complete, I'll offer it for sale on my northlandvelo.eu webshop. So, happy and safe cycling, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!